back, everybody. In this episode, I had a conversation with Brent Hughes. Brent was born in the Philippines and moved to the United States when he was 5 years old. He grew up in California, where he also served as a police officer for 10 years in the cities of Menlo Park and Gilroy. He worked gang and narcotics task forces, he was on SWAT, and he was also a traffic motor officer, but let's not hold that against him. In 2019, all of this got turned upside down when Brent was diagnosed with Arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy, or ARVC. It's an inherited condition which causes a deterioration of the heart. But to add to it, working out and exercising actually speeds up this deterioration. As you can imagine, this diagnosis caused his law enforcement career to come to an abrupt end. In 2020, Brent transitioned from law enforcement into the corporate security world. Today, he is a manager for SureFox Consulting, a contract security consulting firm founded by military veterans. In our conversation, Brent addressed his medical diagnosis, the mental health issues from having to leave law enforcement, and the importance of networking in helping him make this transition. Equally important to him, Brent strives to be a mentor and a resource for members of law enforcement and the military transitioning into the civilian world. An extremely humble man who truly wants to help and give back. It's been my pleasure getting to know him. Episode 6 with Brent Hughes. This is the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantani, and I've been a police officer for 30 years. I'll be having interesting conversations with guests who are former first responders, military, or both, and who will explain their experiences with their transition. I cannot say this enough. Prepare today for your transition tomorrow. Regardless of the why, you're closing in on your retirement, you just want to do something different, or other circumstances have or are forcing your transition. I believe this podcast will be beneficial to you. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Let's get into this. I was finding that the greater majority of law enforcement and military never make it to retirement. Yeah. It's for a variety of reasons.
They say that first thing in an academy. They say about there's 50 of us in the academy. They'll say only 10% or 10 of you will actually retire with 30 years on. So that was the first statistic, first day, and it just took me by surprise.
It was surprising to me when I really started looking into it. And so that was the big, turning point for me, in that I really started saying, okay, here's what I want to focus on. I want to focus on, if I narrowed it down to one statement, it's prepare today because you don't know what tomorrow's going to be.
Yeah.
And I think back to when I had trainees, as a training officer, and they would ask me, hey, should I go get my college degree?
Yeah.
Yes, but
absolutely.
don't get it in criminal justice, because if today or tomorrow you have to step away from this job, a criminal justice degree really doesn't prepare you or market you for much.
Right. So you're limited.
Go get a job. Right. Go get a degree in accounting or
business management, something, communications, anything else than that.
And so that was kind of the overall catalyst for this.
What made you pick the candidates or the people that are interviewing? Is there something that you're looking at, or?
For me personally, I'm looking to talk to people that have, at least in my opinion, an interesting story.
Oh, okay.
If for some reason nobody listens to it, it'll be an interesting conversation for me.
That's cool.
But I do believe that the people that I'll present will have something or some aspect of their story is going to relate to somebody else.
Wow.
And if it's something that allows that one person listening to it to go, you know what, maybe I need to do this. And that's what I really think with your story is going to be interesting in that you're dealing with a significant medical issue.
Yeah.
Definitely one that most people probably wouldn't even think of or know about.
Yeah.
And so maybe there might be something in this conversation that will be beneficial to somebody else who's dealing with maybe something similar.
Yeah, I think the stages are still there, because if you're forced into medical retirement and you've been in law enforcement for a certain amount, or even the military for a certain amount of years, and this is what you know and identified with, you're going to be dealing with grief. And that's something I didn't know until I got professional help is, oh my gosh, it is like grieving a loss, like a death, and, and I had to give myself that time to process and to get over, that loss of not being a police officer. That's not who I am anymore. I can't physically do that anymore. It hit me hard.
Now, how long have you actually been out of it?
Oh my goodness. If June 18th is when was my last day of 2020.
So relatively
new, but dealing with medical and not being in the field, probably 2 years. So and now I'm just starting to feel where, like, I'm seeing the possibilities and where my future in this new career in corporate security can be, and I've been really excited about it. So I'm just fortunate to have met the people that have helped me along the way, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I'm at. It's crazy.
So what was the actual medical diagnosis?
I had arrhythmogenic ARVC, and that's a chronic heart disease, genetic heart disease, and it's arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy. And
common spelling.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so what that disease is if you have this gene, and you could be a carrier of the gene, but if you live a certain lifestyle of physical exertion, stress, basically everything I was doing for 10 years as a police officer, that gene can manifest into the disease. And what the disease does is your muscles in your heart weaken and create scar tissue as you do these physical exertions. And the scar tissue will then mess up your electrical circuits in your heart, causing tachycardia. So I would have symptoms where my heart rate would race to 250 beats per minute. And in the beginning, I thought I was dealing with like PTSD. That was the symptoms I would feel. Fast heart rate, feeling palpitations, sweatiness, lightheadedness, and I was feeling that while on duty. And I'm just thinking, oh, this is anxiety. Took medication for it, and it took the longest time, maybe 4 or 5 years, to get diagnosed with the actual disease and get treatment, and then finally become healthy and stable. But for the longest time, I didn't know what I had.
How many different doctors did you see before it was actually diagnosed?
Well, for the stress part, just a few. I just went to a few doctors. It is one of the hardest disease to diagnose. They said, they were telling me only 10 years ago, the person that would really be diagnosing this is coroners. So I'm lucky to be alive. In that past year, when I was really starting to get symptoms, I was defibrillated, 3 times. Yeah. 1 year I had 24 emergency visit runs, ambulance coming to my house. My wife was pregnant with my 4th kid. It was craziness.
24 in a year?
Easy.
Wow.
Where I'm either being rushed to the ambulance, or my wife is, taking me to the hospital and taking to the emergency room and getting checked. It was just, they couldn't diagnose it. And it was a lot.
Is it one of those stories where you go in, you get checked, and most of the doctors misdiagnose it or whatever, and it's just that one doctor happens to go, let's look left instead of looking right?
Completely. So I had my first incident in December of 2018, and I was just I was off duty, and had a bunch of people at the department and a bunch of my buddies at the house. We were having a few drinks, and the drink actually triggered the symptom. And I think I just took a sip, and then my heart started racing. And at the time, remember, I thought it was anxiety. And I called my buddy. He was working for Gilroy PD, Bobby Zuniga. Thank you so much for saving my life. But he came in, rushed in, and he was working and helped me through my symptoms. And he was helping me breathe and all that. And within 5 minutes, he was looking at my symptoms, and he took my heart rate, and he's like, "No, Brent, this is medical." And I'm calling the ambulance over. They come to my house, and they find out my BPM's 200, 250. And so they're getting ready to defibrillate me and put some medicine in me to get my heart rate down. And I blacked out. I almost blacked out. And right before I did, it was crazy, a little deep, but I said goodbye. I said goodbye to this world. I told whoever, was out there in the great beyond to give me one more shot. My wife was pregnant with my 4th kid at the time. And I said, if I can just have, a few more days with my kids and my wife, I want to be there to see my daughter and being born. And then at that moment, I remember the EMT smacking me in the thigh and saying, hey, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Your heart rate's going down on its own. And then he injected medicine in me to keep my heart rate low. So that was a trip. And but even then, that was the first incident. And throughout that year, that's when the 24 run started, and it just took a long time. And I remember the first time I saw a cardiologist or electrophysiologist who was an expert in this disease, he but he said it'd be a possibility of having the ARVC, but there was no way. And it took a year for him to go like, okay, let's do the genetics testing. And that's what eventually got the proper diagnosis.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's kind of take this
a
little lighter.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
did you grow up here in California?
Yeah. I grew up San Jose, Bay Area, West San Jose, and I was born in the Philippines and came here when I was 5. Yeah.
Family in law enforcement?
No one in law enforcement. When I came here from the Philippines, it was just me, my mom. I have 2 half brothers, stepdad with the half brothers, and that was it. And they got divorced 5 years into their marriage, so it was just me and my 2 brothers. My mom, single mom, she had growing up, I think she had 4 jobs.
Oh wow!
At the same time. Oh yeah, I remember rough nights. We were sleeping in the women's locker room of Mercury News at her graveyard shifts on school nights, and we had a very simple, humble beginning in childhood. So
yeah, but I'm sure that instilled a very strong work ethic in you and your brothers.
I think that's where, if anything, I get my survival skills is from my mom, just doing whatever I have to do to create a life for my family. And I think seeing that got me through my medical and my my grieving process, all of that. And I think having my 4 kids really, and my wife's support just gave me the strength to get through that, because it was a lot for me.
Did you know early on that you wanted to go into law enforcement?
So growing up, I was into sports. I was into basketball. That was my thing. Don't get fooled by my height. I can play some ball. And I think because I was raised with a single mom, she was kind of absent the whole time. So once I started driving, I kind of got into parties and kind of everything that would distract me from grades in school. So in basketball. So I got into a little trouble, and I got into a fight at school, got arrested, and ended up, because I was a good kid, good grades, captain of the basketball team. They're like, why? I was sat in front of a diversion program is what it was. And they asked me, what are you doing with your life? What's going on? And then it was just me and my mom, and kind of bursted out. I was just this young kid, no guidance or whatever. And at that time, I was hanging out with my school resource officer at school. And I told them, just like out of nowhere, I'm like, well, I'm hanging out with the school resource officer. I thought it'd be cool to be a cop. So what they had me do as a kind of a contract to not be charged with assault and battery on school grounds is they had me volunteer at the Campbell Police Department as an explorer cadet.
Was this through the school or through the courts?
This is through the courts. And so, or maybe this was school, maybe both. No, this was through school, the diversion program. So, with the county sheriffs and the school. So it's that way it would be out of courts. But So they introduced me to a few people. I applied, and I remember the first day of my ride along, I was hooked. They had me in a cadet uniform, and I think they gave me some material to study, my 10 codes and things like that. And the officer I rode with was Terry Gallagher. And it's funny because the first 11 hours were, and I'm 17 or 18. 17. I was 17. I was juvenile. So the first 11 hours were boring. I was like, I don't want to be a cop. This is ridiculous. I've never woken up at 5 a.m. to go and volunteer anywhere. Why would I want to do this? And then at the end of the day, like the 11th hour, Terry, the officer I was riding with, he was like, so you want me to take you home? Well, yeah, I don't think this is for me. So then right before we leave, we're in the parking lot of a Safeway, and he recognizes a guy, and he goes, oh, I think I know that guy. I think he has a warrant. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And so then you just sit back. I think we're going to have some fun. And so the guy we're watching, he gets out of a Jeep Cherokee, goes into Safeway. Terry, while the driver's in Safeway, runs the plate. It's stolen. So we just wait on the car. He comes back in the car. We light him up, and then boom, it's a full-on car pursuit. I'm in the passenger seat. I'm 17, and I'm loving it. And all the adrenaline I get from sports, I'm feeling it then. And then we're going, 60 in a 30 residential zone in the apartment complex, hitting garbage cans. Like, this is awesome.
So it's the TV show
that
everybody sees on TV.
Yes.
That they never see the lead up to it.
Exactly. So I got it, and it was awesome. And then the suspect stopped, and we're getting out. Terry gets out of the driver's side and starts giving commands. And the suspect had a bag in his hand, and he drops the bag of drugs. And then the suspect, flees. Terry runs after him. So what's funny about that is, at the time, I think Campbell PD was one of the first with all the tech in their cars, and they had audio recording inside the vehicle. So after
what year is this?
Oh God, 2001, I want to say. And so after the incident, he goes and sees the recording in the car. And what I did was, I was in the car, and after he leaves, I'm going, get him, Terry. Fuck yeah, get him. And I'm like 17, and I'm all into it. So it's one of those things that tests your fight or flights. And
right.
it totally, I was all into it. I did not hesitate, because what happened was the radio or dispatch called me, my call sign, and asked me to get in the car and then drive the car to him. He was like a few blocks down. But I loved it. I got on the radio, I was coordinating with officers and doing all. I felt like part of the team. And then once they arrived, I'm like, oh, he went this way and that way. And I was hooked. I got the bug early. So from 17, 18 years old, I was identifying myself as a cop, and did everything that I could to be a good candidate. And it wasn't until 26 that I got hired.
Now, you were a cadet.
I was a cadet for 3, Explorer Cadet.
Okay.
So that's a voluntary thing. And I did my year of service for the diversion program, but I stayed until 20 and a half, and then went off to the next thing.
So in between basically graduating high school and when you actually got hired as an officer, what'd you do?
Well, the first thing I did, my mom moved, and I was living with her, so I was kind of first to move out. She left to Minnesota. She ended up being diagnosed with cancers, and she had to move to Minnesota, where her husband lived, and kind of left me on my own. So I got my first full-time job. There were no openings over at Campbell PD, and I didn't feel I was ready to apply at 20 and a half. So I went and tried to get some life experience, and applied for a security job at an outdoor shopping center, Santana Row in San Jose, where there's retailers, residents, restaurants. And I thought, okay, this is a full-time job. It can, support me, and I can get all this experience. And started as just a security officer and worked my way up to shift supervisor. It's a great experience. And then from there, I worked at the San Jose airport as a traffic officer for a few years. And, while I was doing those two jobs, I'm trying to get my education, my, college degree and all that. And I think I was working 2 jobs. I was working at the gym and security. So I was always busy.
Again, following in your mom's footsteps.
I think so. I think that's what I'm used to. And then I got a job at the San Jose airport as a traffic officer, and that's where I met two commanders, Chief Moore and Lacey Burt. And I remember I was on the curb and I was reading a book for class, and they both roll up at the terminal and they're picking up their chief. And Chief or Commander Moore asks me, if they can park there, and I'm the guy that usually tells people to fuck off and keep moving. But of course they badged me, and I was like, absolutely, park here. And we ended up talking about everything but police work for a good hour. And I didn't know at the time, but I think she was recruiting me. And then at the end of it, she was like, have you ever thought of law enforcement? And I told her my quick story. And then she said, she gave me a business card. And long story short, I mean, that conversation went from a ride along to an internship, a part-time job, to a year later, they offered a position in their next academy. So
what year did you start as an officer?
2010.
And to this point, you hadn't experienced any of the medical issues with your heart?
No, not at all. And I was super active.
And then you also went on and eventually made SWAT?
Yeah, so I worked patrol in Menlo Park. I was a gang officer for a few years. That was kind of my thing. And then in the same year, I applied for SWAT and got that. And, I was just testing myself in everything in every way I could and pushing the limit, whether it was training and, going to the police Olympics, just competing, adult basketball leagues. I was pushing an Urban Shield competitions, and anything I could do to just push the limit. I was doing it.
So what year was when did you have your first experience with what later become your heart issue?
2015. That's when my second daughter was born, and I was playing basketball, wasn't at work. I was playing basketball and I just passed out. And I didn't think it was anything. I thought it was out of shape or something. And then I started having some more attacks, what I thought were panic attacks at the time. And took some time off work and tried to figure it out. And, I'd only be diagnosed with anxiety, got medications, got stable enough. I would later find out that the medications I was taking was actually worse for the disease. But where was I? But I eventually went back to work and wouldn't have symptoms for the longest time. And then finally at work, I did. And I remember going to a robbery call at a CVS, and went in, and I was clearing an aisle, and I felt it then.
So you could go long periods without what could be better explained as an attack.
Yeah. So again, what creates or what triggers a symptom is the physical exertion. So anything where after a while, I think officers, after they've experienced kind of the ups and downs or the cadence of police work in response to the calls and what kind of calls are going on, as far as what their heart rate can take.
Spoiler alert, it's not 100 miles an hour the entire shift.
It's not, right? So exactly. So you're sitting down having coffee with the guys, and then boom, you go to a call, and then your heart rate's up, but you get to a point where you're used to it. Your body inside might be going 100 miles an hour, but you don't feel it. It's just what's normal. And I think that I was at least seasoned enough to feel that normalcy. And so I was used to it, and I just worked through it. And that's all I knew what to do. So I ignored all the symptoms. And that's what I think I was trained by old school mentality, right? So I just worked through it, and I did that for a long time, probably another 3-4 years.
And so the height of it came 2018?
2018, December 2018 is when I finally had like the worst symptom. And that's when the story I was telling earlier where I was at home and the alcohol triggered it. And, I would have about the same types of incidents ever since then. It just got to a point where it was so bad. And I think what happened is the scar tissue that I was talking about, there was more scar tissue, and the scar tissue became so big it was messing up the electrical circuits that the heart uses to pump the heart. And until you get what's called an ablation to smooth out that scar tissue, you're going to keep having those symptoms.
So when it finally came to its head, I'm assuming you were on light duty or modified duty until...
Yeah. You know, it's funny. And the light duty, the year I did it, was a lot of administrative work. And I value that work because a lot of that work using Excel and Docs and all these programs
is what you're doing now.
Is what I'm doing now. So, it was actually a really good experience. But, yeah. So
going back, if there is anybody who's experiencing the same symptoms, in hindsight, now you found out later on, obviously, that the medication you were taking compounded the issues or was not good for the issues. But going back to when it all started, what might you have looked at more, or what could somebody, if they were in your shoes, say, hey, don't ignore this aspect of it?
Gosh, there's a lot I would have done, and they gave me options and I ignored it. And so one option they provided was taking a heart rate monitor home and wearing that for a month. That way they can catch what's going on when it happens. And I think they would have caught it early if I did that. I was stubborn and I wanted to go work. I was very impressionable in my first 5 years and I just wanted to go work. And I thought, if I have to take a month off of work, that's going to take me away from what I want to do. I didn't want to do it, so I didn't. And if I were to tell anybody in hindsight what to do, I'd tell them to do it. And that your health is more important than any job. I mean, if you're not here, you can't be working. So I wish I would have done it, but I'm fortunate enough to be here now. So.
But ultimately, your treatment was always handled by one doctor, or did it take multiple doctors to get to a final result?
It did. Until I saw the cardiologist and electrophysiologist, I didn't have a lot of answers. So I think another advice I would have for anyone with medical issues is to be your own advocate. And it sucks. Don't do the searching WebMD and everything and thinking you have cancer or anything like that, but definitely do your due diligence on asking the right questions and being thorough with your physician, and just making sure that you've kind of, do everything they're suggesting to do. And, because if you don't tell them everything that you're feeling, they can't help you. And I think that's what I was not doing.
Being that it's a genetic issue, could you have gotten ahead of it enough to be able to stay active in law enforcement?
No. Oh, so once it's done. Like, so another story is when I found out I had the disease, we did genetic testing on all four of my kids, and I have 3 girls, 1 son. My son's the oldest. He's only 9 now, and we found out he's the only one that is carrying the gene. So it ripped my heart. Emotionally finding out he had it. I was raising him kind of to be the same way. He was very active, sports, basketball, football, martial arts. He was doing a bunch of things. So we are now having to pull him away from that. He can't do that for the rest of life. No competitive sports. So it's a blessing, though, to know that he has it, because now we can prevent. One will know and monitor it as he grows up, and he can take the right treatment in order to help treat the symptoms and hopefully prevent the manifestation of the gene.
Is it more common in men than women?
It's more common in men than women. I believe I was reading It is common to get symptoms at about age 30 to 40 years old for men, later in women. And I believe the percentage is like 1 in 10,000 people are diagnosed with this disease.
Wow.
It's rare, but not uncommon.
So June 2020 is when you separated from law enforcement.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you sought help.
Yeah.
So kind of walk me through that process.
So I sought help prior to that. When I was diagnosed in January 2020. So that's when it hit me hard. And I definitely, looking back, I was definitely depressed. I locked myself in the living room, didn't want to get out. I wanted to keep the living room dark. I was sitting on the couch. I was too afraid to do anything in case it triggered anything. Didn't want to go to the emergency room anymore. I had some really dark thoughts, and I couldn't face my family. I was at a point where, I wanted to cry. There's several times I did. I didn't want to do it in front of my family. I would wait until my family would go to sleep. I'd come downstairs and I'd just bawl out. And I'd do that. I was doing that for a month. So finally, I was done with feeling that way and wanted to be there for my family, my wife, and my kids. So I sought out help, and there is a employees assistance program for the department I work for, and luckily the therapist I was seeing was a former police officer former Gilroy PD, and it was great. She knew me, but not well enough where it was a conflict of interest or anything, but she knew the industry. She knew everything that I was feeling when I described everything. And it was when she told me about, hey, Brent, you're grieving a death, that hit me big because I didn't understand that. I knew it, but it was just a good comparison.
Was the writing kind of already on the wall that you were going to be having to leave law enforcement? Yeah.
Once I got diagnosed, I knew. And that sucked because for 17, 18 years old, that's all I saw myself. And then after 9 years, and after what I thought was a successful career and going into Gilroy PD. So I lateraled from Menlo Park to Gilroy because we live in Gilroy. I was kind of tired of the commute. So I felt like I came home, and it was great. And I really enjoyed working for my community, and I really, really felt like I was making a difference. And to just start, and get my feet wet there and then have it ripped away was another thing. But to not be that person that I was really hit me. I felt like, at no fault of my own, but I felt like I was a disappointment to my kids. My son, who looked at me in a certain way when I came home in uniform, my wife, I don't know. It just, there was something that I felt that being this person was something that they were proud of.
But we do that a lot to ourselves. We put that burden on our shoulders without giving our loved ones the opportunity to accept us as we are.
Yeah. And I know better. I know she loves, I met her at 20. So we've been together I'm 37 now. We met at 20, 21. So she's seen the whole ride pretty much. Right. And, so I know, but yeah, I think I've put that pressure on myself ever since.
So making the transition, when did you start thinking about what you were going to do or move on to?
I didn't know. I had no idea what to do. I thought of so many things. The first day once I became healthy enough to get off the freaking couch, I said, I'm going to get a job today. And this was probably just the day that they told me I'm not getting paid anymore. So, we own a house. We have all these financial responsibilities. Luckily, God bless my wife. She handles our finances. We were good for 6 months, but I didn't want to collect a government check. I wanted to work. And so I sat down, and it was a job, and I applied to gosh, 100 jobs, and I was applying to janitor jobs, to I applied at Target. I worked there for a little bit, but it wasn't a career for me with my experience, and so I saw a position as an account manager for security. I worked security before, but it was for corporate security, which is different than the mall security I was doing. So, and I knew that's what I was good at, and all the skills that I didn't know what would transfer over to this career, but I'm learning now of those skills: communication skills, structure, leadership, all those things can apply into a leadership skill or leadership position in corporate security. So I told myself, I'm just going to stick to what I'm good at. I don't want to venture off. So then I met, what the first thing that was suggested to me to a friend was start a LinkedIn. And that has been the best platform for me in creating, or being involved in the same network of people that are in these positions. And once I created my profile, I just took the initiative to start connecting with people and targeting specific people. So I was targeting people that were in corporate security, leadership positions, and that were former law enforcement.
So you knew that that's the direction you wanted to go. You wanted to focus on corporate security.
Yes. What
hurdles were you finding that were the most difficult to overcome in getting into corporate security?
One, like we said earlier, was the formal education, which I'm still seeking. Another hurdle is once I got in, as far as adjusting to the environment, I think you got to take ego out the door. And this is for a lot of like military and law enforcement friends that I have. And I still talk to a lot of friends who are either medically retiring or deciding to get out. That's the first thing I tell them. A lot of people don't care. And I think we were in a position where, the job was so, we think of it as prestigious. We think of it as meaningful or purpose. As a police officer, you're expected to go to any call and command it, at any given time. And when you're stepping into an office of corporate, in the corporate world, no one understands where you were, who you were, or quite frankly, they don't care. So I think taking that ego, putting it away is huge and something I had to get used to.
What's because we've all been through the law enforcement testing process and the hiring process. What's the hiring process like on the corporate security side or corporate side?
A little different. I haven't had too much. It's not the same in government. It's a lot more formal. In corporate security, I would say it's a little more basic with just your basic interview. But I think in preparing for that, you really have to know what you bring to the table. And so for me, doing my resume, getting help to do my resume was everything. So I even connected with a lady who was a senior recruiter in the corporate sector, and that's all she did was look at resumes all day. And we set up a virtual conference meeting, and she just went through it. I gave her everything I had on what my accomplishments were, what I did, what kind of and she was telling me like even how a resume looks is the the aesthetics of it is big. She told me my first draft was feminine, and I said, "Really?
Did you have flowers on the paper or what?"
Close to it, I guess. To her, I used a Word template, and it was I think the ink was blue, light blue.
Hey, that thin blue line.
Yeah, right. That's what I was thinking. No, she said that you want to come out bold and have a very masculine, you come from law enforcement and you want a leadership position. So have something that's masculine that will show that you come from that and that you have those skills. So it was very plain, and the template is plain, but I get what she was saying. But if I hadn't done those things, I wouldn't know, what to do. So that was good advice from her. And then also, just knowing what was on my resume and having your resume tailored to each position that you apply for is huge.
So that makes me think of something. When you say tailored to, can you give an example?
I think there's certain words that you would want to put in there. What I'm trying to say is you don't want a generic resume and then just send it out to a bunch of open positions. If they're looking for specific skills, you have to bring that out of your bag of tricks and give that specific skill that they're looking for. So that comes with a lot of studying and reading the job description and knowing if you have that from your experience and then put that on paper.
But ultimately, would you recommend hiring a professional resume writer or preparer?
Yeah. I mean, if I didn't have contacted that lady, I definitely would have. Absolutely. It's a great investment.
So is she different than, she was a headhunter, so to speak?
She was a recruiter. She was a recruiter to a corporate security company. So that was just advice. I still think of doing it just to see if there's anything else I can add, but I haven't yet. But I would definitely recommend it to anyone else that was doing it.
And how's your experience been working in the corporate world?
Great. Not perfect. I've definitely jumped around positions. Trying to, some of it is me trying to adjust in the industry. And others are, out of my hands, either, a company losing. I'm on the contract security side of corporate security. So, companies lose accounts and, I'm a part of that. And so I have to adapt. And then the other part of it is trying to find a company, a culture where that fits my, my values and what I'm looking to get out of the career.
Are you finding, especially today with law enforcement doesn't have the best reputation, is it carrying over onto the private or the corporate side? Or what I'm getting at is, are you coming up against any type of prejudices? They don't really like law enforcement, or are they embracing the fact that you're former law enforcement?
I've had both where there's preconceived, notions, or just they have this image of what a police officer is. And, I'll get comments, oh, you're not who I thought you'd be after meeting me. And, knowing you're a police officer, I ask, what does that mean? Like, oh, well, you have a personality. And I'm like, well, I think all police officers do, you have to get to know them. And police officers, when they're on a scene, there is a certain demeanor that they, I think, are responsible for carrying because of the call that they're called to do, or for the responsibilities that they're called to do. And I've found that fun to do. I try not to do it a lot. I don't like talking about law enforcement too much unless someone is inviting me to do it. But I do like sharing my experiences because I don't think that's done enough to where people really understand what responsibilities police officers have, and really from the time we get the call to what information we're getting prior to getting to scene and what has transpired. Like, I don't think people really know the whole picture or educated on it. They just see what they see on TV,
right,
or movies.
Do you find though that when it does happen, they rely on your experience? In the sense that, do they want you to step up and really kind of take control, or is it still kind of, no, stop, you're not a cop, don't be that guy anymore?
Both. I think both. I have to, what I tell people in my teams is, I let them know I think I bring a lot of experience to the table from my law enforcement career. However, I will only bring what I think is applied and what the team feels applies. So, and that's what I mean by taking the ego out of the door, or because we're not cops anymore. And I think we can bring a lot to the table, but the mission and objectives are completely different in corporate security. So you have to adjust and adapt
Did you find it a struggle for you to kind of step away from that identity?
Completely. I'm preparing documents that are very similar to operation plans that may not be the same purpose or have the same purpose for maybe an event that I'm preparing for, and it's a little too much. Some things apply, some don't, so I'm still learning that. There's a whole security language, I think, that is out there that I'm still learning. So yeah, that is a challenge, yeah.
And you mentioned you're still working on your degree.
Yeah. I'm 6 classes away, and yeah.
For someone intending to go towards corporate security, what would you recommend as a degree to aim for?
Well, depending on what positions they want in corporate security, there's a vast of, positions, but for me personally, I can only speak to myself. I'm seeking a leadership role. I would lean on business management, leadership, communication, anything like that. Possibly where I'm looking to do is a threat management. Anything like that would be, I think, useful.
Any other training or anything that you could get under your belt in anticipation that you can look back on maybe when you were in law enforcement? Oh, if I would have gone to that class, or
while in law enforcement, police officers. If you're a detective out there listening, I think a lot of those skills, your investigation skills, are going to apply in corporate security. If you're in law enforcement and you're looking to move up the ladder, being a corporal, being a sergeant is huge. Corporate security definitely looks at leadership roles or anyone in leadership from law enforcement. I think it's a higher climb, me not having that position while in law enforcement. So if you're in those 3 areas, I think it would favor them highly if they're transitioning.
Does rank really carry that much weight when you're moving over?
I believe
your
so.
Former rank.
Yeah, I believe so. It tells, I think, certain corporations or corporate companies what experience you bring to the table, and if you're a corporal overseeing a few officers or a certain incident or scene, that gives them an idea of your management skills.
What do you find from your coworkers? So there's obviously management that's looking at the skill set you bring to the table, but what do you find from your coworkers? Do you find that they seek your guidance, or they're kind of against it?
It depends. I've had both. Not sure if the law enforcement may rub people the wrong way. I don't know what people are thinking. I don't want to assume. But I've also had great experiences with people seeking it. I find personally I've had better experiences. In corporate security, there's a lot of people that, their end goal is to be a police officer. So really one of the rewarding things in a leadership position for me, having the background in law enforcement, having a leadership position in corporate security, I'm able to be now a mentor to this younger generation, maybe starting in corporate security, but trying to seek a law enforcement career. So it's rewarding having to, be a resource to them, let them know from my experience what I think is useful, and them, taking that advice.
But again, like you mentioned earlier, leave the ego at the door. Be yourself, as opposed to being the former police officer.
Yeah, that's huge. I think that's huge.
Now, one of the things that I've heard recently, and something that, how can I put it? You need to do the research on yourself. But for instance, most who have come up through law enforcement are used to going into an interview with a suit and tie. But I'm hearing more and more, corporate America isn't looking for a suit and tie anymore.
No.
What's your experience with that?
My first experience with virtual conference interviews in the pandemic. So that was that was the rough. So if you're not technically savvy with setting up a Zoom meeting, practice with a friend. But so I had to figure all that out. It was my first time. I was good enough to do it, but even that, I showed up my first virtual conference interview in a suit and tie, and everyone in the room is wearing a t-shirt and some flip-flops. I don't know, but I felt overdressed, but it was just what I knew, done it for 10 years. Every interview I had, I was either in uniform or in a suit and tie.
So reaching out to somebody, you've talked about reaching out to a corporate recruiter. Is that person also somebody who's going to be a good liaison for preparing for your interview, or should you be looking for somebody else?
I've done both. So reaching out to recruiters, I mean, they're advocate. They're trying to get you in the door. Talking to them is huge. I've heard of other people doing it too. But
a recruiter might not necessarily be an employee of the company, though, you're trying to get to.
It could be they could be that position can be contracted out, but they're again advocating for you, and they want you to get in. I think it's incentive for them to get as many qualified people in the door. So I've had meets with recruiters who tell me what I need for the position, and that's helped me at least set goals for myself to be better prepared for that position in the future.
What importance would you put on networking?
Huge. Being a part of listening to podcasts like this, being part of groups online that there's literally a transitioning group from corporate from public service to corporate security that I follow, and there have been former sergeants, chiefs, DAs who provided almost everything I needed: templates for resumes, contacts, job opening and posts, listening to discussions like this on what people have done to be successful or what failures they've had, so you can learn from them. And I would just spend nights just listening to this stuff, and that's helped me too.
Would you say that, well, going back to when you were active in law enforcement, did you have a long-term plan at that time, or was it simply just the job?
It was simply the job. Retire 30 years. And, that was my dream. I thought of nothing else, and that is a huge mistake. Right when I started to get into corporate security and talking to my friends in law enforcement, I said it so many times, I think they were annoyed by it, where I'm like, hey guys, have a plan B. If you're not in school, get back in it. If, even while in law enforcement, create a LinkedIn account. It doesn't hurt, especially if you're almost about to retire and you're 5 years away from retiring, start making those networks, because, and it's not, all you're doing, in my opinion, is just making relationships and them getting to know you. And if a position comes up, I mean, really the job ends up coming to you. And so that's what I tell them.
A lot of the saying is repeated over and over again, but it carries a lot of weight, and I think it's true. It's a lot about what you know, but it's more about who you know.
Yeah.
And especially within the law enforcement and military realm, many times job opportunities come because of a contact that you have.
Sure.
Who's currently in position A, is going to be getting out, going to be retiring themselves. Mm-hmm. Hey, are you interested in this? Mm-hmm. And so it's having that network in place before you need it.
Yes, absolutely. I think every job I've had, I've known somebody to assist me get in, and that helps. Yeah.
So most important, you've now transitioned. What's your long-term? What are you looking at your long-term goals?
Long-term goals is what I would like to do is carry a leadership role for a company that, has that values my skill set, and where I can be in a position of influence helping a team be successful and meet the company's goals. I would like a position, that really uses my skills, whether it be from law enforcement or the skills I've obtained in the last year as in corporate security, to be that influence for others. To drive the team to success, really.
And how are you doing health-wise?
I'm stable, yeah. So no more CrossFit or gym for me. It's I'm 37 going 65. I'm out there playing golf. Me and my son took that up recently, and so that's kind of my new thing now.
Yeah, and your head, as far as dealing with the headspace are you still seeing professional help? Or?
No, I'm not. I think I've gotten out of that space, and I'm doing really well. It wasn't for my family, my wife, and kids, and really close friends to get me out of it. I wouldn't be in the position I'm in mentally, and the help that I seek or sought out. So no, I'm doing much better today.
Can people reach out to you through LinkedIn if they...
Absolutely. Please. Yeah, please do.
Anybody looking to make the transition, definitely, reach out to you as for nothing more than just some advice and some mentorship.
Absolutely.
As being, you're already there.
Yeah. I've ways to go, but absolutely. If someone's still in law enforcement, military, I would love to help them out. I work for a company that caters to military and law enforcement transition, SureFox. So if anyone's looking for a position, please reach out to me. We definitely are looking for qualified individuals.
Thank you for taking your time to listen to the podcast. I truly hope you enjoyed it. Not only is the podcast available on audio platforms, but you can also watch it on YouTube at the Transition Drill Podcast channel. The best way you can help the show is by getting the word out. Please subscribe for future episodes. If you think somebody else might enjoy it, I would appreciate it if you would share it with them. Also, if you have the time, please go to Apple Podcast and leave me a rating. I welcome your feedback, both positive and negative. You can also go to the website, transitiondrillpodcast.com, and through the contact tab, send a message directly to my email with any comments or suggestions. Thank you again, and I hope you tune in for the next one.